Azazel is a name laden with ancient enigmas and questions that push the boundaries of theology. From the dawn of Hebrew tradition to contemporary speculation, this figure appears like a spectre standing at the crossroads of myth and reality. In Leviticus's scapegoat ritual, Azazel is mentioned as the recipient of a singular sacrifice, a goat sent into the wilderness carrying the community's guilt. The Book of Enoch, meanwhile, portrays Azazel as a fallen angel bound for teaching forbidden knowledge. These two facets sit halfway between divinity and demonhood, benefactor and betrayer. In this script, we embark on a long journey to understand who Azazel is, what his multiple faces represent, and how his story has echoed through cultures around the world. Symbolically, Azazel functions as a vanishing point for everything that does not fit within religious norms. The Jewish tradition mentions him cautiously. The Christian tradition uses him as an example of angelic corruption, and apocryphal literature casts him as the protagonist of a rebellion. Beyond religious interpretations, Azazel also appears in popular culture, in fantasy literature, films and television. Why has a character mentioned so briefly in the biblical text generated such a rich imaginary? Perhaps because he embodies the figure of the transgressor, who, though punished, manages to sow a seed of change. Humanity has always been fascinated by those who cross boundaries, physical and moral alike. Azazel personifies that dangerous crossing. Our goal is to connect these historical, cultural, and psychological threads. We will dive into sacred texts to recover the original context of Azazel, explore myths from other cultures to see how the archetype of the punished teacher repeats, examine modern theories that interpret him as a bearer of technical knowledge or even as a being from other worlds, and finally reflect on what Azazel means on both personal and collective levels. In this unhurried journey, each section will peel away layers of meaning like an onion. We may not arrive at a single truth in the end, but contemplating the mystery will reveal the depth of the questions the figure of Azazel raises. The scapegoat ritual and Azazel. The textual basis begins in Leviticus 16, which describes one of the most solemn rituals in the Israelite calendar, the Day of Atonement. On that day, the high priest performs sacrifices and purification rites to cleanse the people of Israel from their sins. 2 goats are chosen. One is offered on the temple altar as a sacrifice to the Eternal, and the other is sent into the wilderness after the priest symbolically places all the community's guilt upon its head. This second animal, known as the scapegoat, is destined for a region described as belonging to Azazel. The gesture is loaded with meaning. Evil is transferred to an animal sent far away, releasing the people from their burden. But who is Azazel, the recipient to whom the goat is sent? The biblical text offers few details, but opens the door to interpretations that see him as a personification of evil, a desert demon devouring guilt, or even a geographic location. This ambiguity has fueled theological debates for centuries. Scapegoat ceremonies involving transfer and expulsion exist in many cultures. In ancient Greece, the pharmakos was a person sacrificed or exiled as scapegoat to purify the city. In Babylon's New Year festival, a symbolic object carrying the city's faults was sent away. Indigenous cultures transfer illness or bad luck to dolls or animals that are buried or thrown into water. These rituals point to a human need to externalize guilt and suffering. For Israel, sending the goat into the wilderness was liberating, but also acknowledged the existence of forces dwelling beyond the camp. The desert is a place of silence, austerity, and testing. There, Azazel awaits as receptacle of impurity. In the Bible, the desert is a place of divine encounter and demonic confrontation. The Israelites wandered in the wilderness for 40 years, facing temptations and forging their identity. Jesus fasted 40 days in the desert and was tempted by Satan. The prophet Elijah sought refuge in the wilderness when fleeing Jezebel's wrath. In this stark landscape, the mind is stripped bare and humans meet their limits. That Azazel dwells in the desert suggests that evil is not found only in cities and temples, but in liminal zones where norms dissolve. The scapegoat crosses that border and carries guilt to a space where rules do not apply. At the same time, sending guilt away risks not confronting it. The ritual reminds us that while it is necessary to let go of our burdens, we must also look within to avoid repeating mistakes. Such reflections remain relevant. Who are our modern scapegoats? We sometimes blame minority groups, political leaders, natural phenomena, or technologies for the evils we suffer. Instead of taking responsibility for social, environmental, or ethical problems, we transfer blame. In this sense, Azazel acts as a mirror for our projections. The sending of the goat is a metaphor for our tendency to place responsibility for our actions onto others. Recognizing this dynamic is the first step toward changing it. Azazel, in the Book of Enoch. To deepen our understanding of Azazel, it is essential to turn to extra-biblical texts, such as the Book of Enoch, an apocalyptic work widely circulated in the intertestamental period. Though not part of the Jewish or Christian biblical canon, it influenced religious imagination. In the section known as the Book of the Watchers, we read of a group of angels called Watchers who observed humans from heaven. Led by Semihaza, these beings were seduced by the beauty of human women and descended to the earth to join them. Their unions produced giants, the Nephilim, colossal beings who eventually devoured everything they found. Azazel appears as one of the most notable Watchers. He is credited with teaching humans arts deemed dangerous, such as making swords, constructing armor, using cosmetics and adornments, and working metals and precious stones. Enoch lists the names and teachings of many Watchers. Semihaza teaches spells and enchantments. Arakiel instructs on the signs of the earth. Barakel teaches the signs of lightning. Kokabel reveals the constellations. Penemu teaches writing and ink. Kazdeja instructs on spirits and demons. Azazel, in particular, introduces metallurgy. He shows how to extract ore, forge swords, knives, and shields. He also teaches how to polish nails, beautify eyelids, and adorn the body. In other words, he provides tools for defense and seduction. The text suggests that the world becomes corrupt because of these skills. Blood is shed, vanity grows, and violence multiplies. God decides to send a flood to purify the earth in response to the Watcher's actions. In this context, Azazel is a catalyst for corruption, but also a promoter of technological progress. The Watchers are punished exemplarily. Enoch recounts that the archangel Uriel is sent to warn Noah of the flood. Michael, Gabriel, Raphael, and Suriel are sent to bind the Watchers in the valleys of the earth. Azazel is ordered bound hand and foot and cast into a dark desert in Dudael, where rough stones torment him. His eyes are covered so he cannot see the light, and he remains there until the final judgment. This punishment underscores a divine insistence on preserving cosmic order. Yet the figure of Enoch, the man who walks with God and is taken up without dying, suggests the possibility of transcending human condition without violence. The story contrasts the fatal result of disobedience with the reward of fidelity. From a modern perspective, the Watchers personify fascination and fear of knowledge. Humanity has experienced eras when technical advances were revered as divine gifts, and eras when innovators were persecuted as heretics. Azazel's story shows that cultural context determines whether knowledge is seen as liberating or corrupting. Metallurgy has been fundamental for agricultural tools and weapons of conquest. Cosmetics can dignify or oppress. Azazel's memory prompts us to question the values guiding our use of technique and aesthetics. Mythological parallels, Prometheus and Greek creativity. The first mythological parallel that arises in discussing Azazel is Prometheus, the Greek titan who stole fire from the gods to give to humans. According to Greek myth, Zeus hid fire from humanity as punishment for an earlier deception by Prometheus. Compassionate toward mortals, the Titan took a burning torch from Helios's chariot and brought it to Earth. Fire represents light, knowledge, technology, and civilization. Thanks to it, humans could warm themselves, cook, work metal, and progress. However, Prometheus's daring sparked Zeus's anger. He chained Prometheus to a Caucasian rock where an eagle devoured his liver daily. Each night it regenerated, perpetuating his torment. The figure of Prometheus embodies the archetype of the benefactor punished for defying divine authority. The story does not end with his punishment. Hesiod tells that Zeus, as part of his revenge, sends Pandora to Earth. Pandora carries a jar containing all the world's evils: disease, old age, arduous labor, disillusion. When she opens it, these afflictions escape. According to some accounts, only hope remains inside. This sequence suggests that Prometheus's transgression triggers a balance. The gift of fire is offset by the woes accompanying civilization. The sacrifice of Prometheus and Pandora's act show that progress has a price. Likewise, Azazel brings to humanity the ability to forge and beautify, but he also introduces war and vanity. Beyond tragedy, Prometheus is a symbol of creative spirit. Plato regards him as a cultural hero. Nietzsche exalts him as a model of rebellion and generosity. Mary Shelley subtitled Frankenstein "The Modern Prometheus" to refer to Victor Frankenstein. the scientist who creates life and faces the consequences. In contemporary literature, Prometheus appears in stories, novels, and comics as an archetype. Comparing him with Azazel reveals how narratives explore the tension between innovation and authority. Where Prometheus acts from compassion, Azazel acts from a desire to share hidden knowledge. Where Prometheus is punished by exposure to the eagle, Azazel is confined in the desert. Some analyses present Prometheus as a precursor of the modern scientist. His curiosity and willingness to break rules to benefit humanity anticipate the attitude of those who dedicate their lives to discovering new natural laws. But the modern Prometheus also warns of knowledge without moral guidance. Victor Frankenstein, in Shelley's novel, creates an artificial being without anticipating the emotional consequences for himself and his creature. His tragedy stems not from the act of creation, but from his inability to take responsibility. Azazel, similarly, is condemned not just for teaching metalworking, but for failing to accompany that knowledge with necessary ethics. This comparison prompts us to consider how we transmit knowledge and what is expected of teachers and learners. Greek mythology offers other comparable characters. Hephaestus, god of fire and forge, works metal with mastery and builds weapons for gods and heroes. Unlike Prometheus, Hephaestus operates within the divine system. He represents legitimate technique exercised under divine supervision. Another figure is Daedalus, inventor of the labyrinth and wax wings. Daedalus helps Theseus, but also causes tragedies. His son Icarus dies flying too close to the sun. Icarus's story illustrates the temptation of excessive ambition and the fragility of limits. As a rebellious teacher, Azazel shares traits with Daedalus. Both possess extraordinary technical knowledge and become symbols, warning of the dangers of exceeding what is permitted. Loki and Norse mischief. Another resonant echo is Loki, the cunning god of Norse mythology. Loki is complex. He is a trickster who sometimes helps the gods, and at other times his playfulness turns to malice and treachery. Born of giants, he moves between worlds with ease. His cleverness allows him to solve problems, but it also provokes catastrophes. In a well-known story, Loki deceives Hother into shooting the mistletoe arrow that kills Balder, the shining god. This act sets off a chain of events leading to Ragnarok, the god's apocalyptic destiny. Loki's genealogy is fascinating. He fathers monstrous creatures, the wolf Fenrir, the serpent Jörmungandr encircling the world, and the goddess Hel who rules the underworld. Each child fulfills a role in the god's doom. Fenrir will devour Odin at Ragnarok. Jörmungandr will fight Thor to mutual death. Hel will receive most of the dead. Loki's union with the giantess Angerboda symbolizes alliance between chaotic forces. His offspring are not evil per se. They represent untamed natural forces challenging Asgard's order. Throughout the sagas, Loki participates in many episodes. He helps Thor recover his hammer by convincing a giant to exchange it for Freya's hand. To solve the situation, Loki has Thor disguise himself as a bride. In another tale, he competes with the dwarf Braka to create treasures. Mjolnir, the ring Draupnir, the ship Skidbladnir. Loki loses the bet and Brokr sews his lips as punishment. These stories depict a character who breaks norms, lies, and manipulates, yet whose cleverness also rescues the gods from greater problems. Ultimately, his treachery culminates in Baldur's murder and his own punishment. Loki shares with Azazel the condition of transgressor bound in chains. Both are punished for contributing to chaos, though their motives differ. Loki may be driven by jealousy or the pleasure of disorder. Azazel, in Enoch's story, seems driven by curiosity and a desire to teach. Nonetheless, the divine reaction is similar. Isolate him so his actions no longer affect the world. Comparing Loki and Azazel invites us to consider how cultures explain the presence of chaos and duality in human nature. Loki is necessary for stories to have conflict and change. Azazel, similarly, introduces the temptation of knowledge and beauty that without wisdom can lead to destruction. The Norse peoples did not view Loki as an absolute demon. His figure was ambivalent, a force necessary for the narrative to move forward. In real life, people who act as agents of chaos can also bring innovation. In organizations, someone who questions norms may help detect unseen issues. In science, dissenters sometimes lead to paradigm shifts. Loki's story warns that unregulated creativity can be destructive, but total repression of dissent may also be harmful. Azazel similarly symbolizes the tension between the need for control and the urgency of change. Set and the desert conflict. In Egyptian mythology, The figure most akin to Azazel regarding desert association and conflict is Set. This god of the desert and storms is brother to Osiris and Isis. Set personifies chaos, aridity, war, and violence. In the Osiris myth, Set murders and dismembers his brother, scattering his parts across Egypt. Isis patiently gathers them to revive him. Eventually, Horus, son of Isis and Osiris, battles Set for the throne. This ongoing conflict symbolizes the struggle between order and chaos, fertility and drought, the Nile and the desert. Set's character evolves through Egyptian history. In early periods, he was a protective god, associated with the strength needed to repel Apophis, the great serpent of chaos threatening Ra's solar bark. Depictions show a mysterious animal, part dog, part donkey, with curved snout. This creature does not exist in nature, suggesting Set embodies the unusual and untamable. Over time, especially in the New Kingdom, Set shifted from ally of order to symbol of foreigners and traitors, because the Hyksos invaders adopted him as patron. The native monarchy, seeking to reinforce Egyptian identity, demonized Set and associated him with tyranny and disloyalty. Set's evolution shows how a god can be reinterpreted according to political and social circumstances. Initially, he is a defender of the sun and champion against primordial monsters. Later, he becomes the traitor who kills his brother. Yet in some temples, Set continued to be venerated as necessary to repel evil. This ambivalence recalls Azazel, who can be seen as teacher or corrupter. Both represent duality. They are needed for balance yet feared for their power. Likewise, the desert is not only a place of punishment, it is a space that allows renewal and trial. Set and Azazel can also be compared in sacrificial aspects. In Osiris's myth, the dismemberment and reassembly of his body prefigure the cycle of death and resurrection repeated in the Nile's flooding. The Nile fertilizes the land, but the desert defines the limits of fertility. Without the desert, the Nile would be meaningless. Similarly, the existence of Azazel gives meaning to the ritual of atonement. Without a recipient for sin, forgiveness lacks a symbol. While Set remains active in Egyptian cosmology, Azazel becomes passive after his punishment. Yet exile does not mean oblivion. Both persist at the world's margins. Other cross-cultural transgressors. Cultures worldwide tell of beings that defy divine authority and pay a price. In Mesopotamian myth, Enki steals the tablets of destiny to aid humanity, and Lamashtu is a female spirit who preys on pregnant women. In Aztec tradition, the feathered serpent Quetzalcoatl brings maize and arts to humans, then, tricked into drunkenness, exiles himself to the sea. Some accounts show him burning on a jade pyre and transforming into the morning star. While Quetzalcoatl is not punished by the gods, his self-exile recalls the idea of a teacher abandoning his disciples. In the Epic of Gilgamesh, the hero challenges the gods to gain immortality, only to discover that privilege belongs to the divine order. Indian mythology offers the demon Hiranyakashipu, who challenges Vishnu and receives an ingenious punishment. Narasimha, half man, half lion, kills him on his doorstep, neither inside nor outside, at dusk, neither day nor night, with claws, neither weapon nor tool. The gods uphold promises while dispensing justice. The story underscores that those who defy divine order will be punished. Yet the fulfillment of divine law is more complex than it appears. In Zoroastrian tradition, Angra Mainyu represents the evil principle opposing Ahura Mazda. He is defeated at the end of time but sows lies and disasters during the struggle. That principle of evil is necessary for good to manifest. Azazel's existence can be understood as reflecting that balance. Chinese lore tells of Quafu, who chases the sun to bring it to humanity, dying of exhaustion. His body transforms into forests benefiting humans. The quest for knowledge may cost the seeker's life, but their fruits serve the community. Polynesian mythology recounts Maui capturing the sun and slowing its path, giving more daylight. He too suffers punishment and dies while seeking immortality for humans. Together these stories form a mosaic of figures who, like Azazel, break rules and expand horizons. Though these tales come from different cultures, they share the archetype of the transgressive hero or deity. Some, like Quetzalcoatl and Maui, are seen benevolently. Others, like Lamashtu or Angra Mainyu, are demonized. The evaluation depends on how the outcome is perceived. If the knowledge delivered is seen as a greater good, the transgressor may be revered. If it brings suffering, they are condemned. Azazel occupies an intermediate point. He gives useful knowledge, but the societies that receive it are unprepared. His punishment reminds us that timing and readiness are crucial for knowledge rather than a curse. Modern interpretations and theories. Moving into contemporary theories, Azazel takes on unexpected hues. Some proponents of the ancient astronaut hypothesis interpret Azazel and the Watchers as beings from another world who brought technology to humanity. According to this view, metallurgical skills, cosmetics, and warfare were not human inventions, but the result of contact with advanced beings. Supporters argue that the Book of Enoch's descriptions of angels descending and sharing secrets align with accounts of visitors descending from ships. In this narrative, Azazel's punishment is seen as the termination of cosmic cooperation programs. Another theory suggests that Azazel is not extraterrestrial, but a symbol of advanced human civilizations that existed before the flood and passed on knowledge to survivors. Alternative archaeologists point to supposed evidence of iron objects predating the Iron Age, or artifacts defying conventional chronologies. Azazel would then be an antediluvian teacher whose memory became myth. Some African and Mesoamerican legends speak of peoples skilled in metallurgy, astronomy, and medicine who vanished in cataclysms. Mainstream academia views such claims as speculative and lacking solid foundation. A third interpretation sees Azazel as the personification of technology itself. Metalworking allowed humans to radically alter their environment. Cosmetics transformed perceptions of beauty. Iron weapons multiplied violence. By imputing these changes to an external agent, tradition partially absolves humanity of responsibility for their use. In this sense, Azazel is an invention to explain why we adopt techniques that harm us. Personifying technology is also seen in modern stories where abstract concepts appear as characters. Artificial intelligence is portrayed as a being with motivations and desires. Azazel thus represents our ambivalences. Other scholars view Azazel as a symbol of adversity and scapegoating. He is not a bearer of technology, but the embodiment of our need to find a culprit for evil stemming from modernization. In societies where technological change causes uncertainty, there is temptation to blame an external entity. This connects with conspiracy theory thinking, which posits hidden forces controlling advances. Azazel lends himself to such narratives. He was an angel who brought knowledge and was punished. Hence, the idea is reinforced that a select group of beings or people controls science and manipulates humanity. For some authors of analytical psychology, Azazel is an archetype of the charismatic leader who delivers secrets, but whose charisma becomes dangerous. In our day, technological innovators and science gurus inspire fascination and suspicion. When new technology appears, society embraces it enthusiastically, then quickly voices caution. The Azazel archetype is activated whenever debate on innovation ethics ignites. In that sense, the modern reading of Azazel invites us to think critically about the stories accompanying science and how myths are built around those who introduce radical change. Contemporary reflections, science, ethics, and the future. In a world where genetic engineering, artificial intelligence, and space exploration advance rapidly, Azazel's story takes on new meaning. Some thinkers link his teaching of metallurgy and cosmetics with today's manipulation of genetic codes and creation of synthetic organisms. Just as the Watchers taught mixing metals and adorning bodies, genetic engineers now manipulate DNA sequences and edit genes determining physical appearance and disease resistance. The debate over modifying human embryos evokes the feeling of transgressing divine limits. Supporters argue these interventions could eradicate hereditary diseases and improve quality of life. Detractors fear the creation of a genetically superior elite and inequality. Azazel's memory warns of unforeseen consequences when introducing new knowledge. Artificial intelligence confronts us with dilemmas about what it means to be human. If an artificial consciousness were ever developed, would it be comparable to a new Watcher, giving us knowledge and capabilities, but also potentially surpassing us? Science fiction is full of AI that rebel, as in Isaac Asimov's stories or the Terminator films. These tales are modern moral stories recalling Azazel's punishment. The creator faces the creature. The difference is that in the myth, the creator punishes the messenger. In fiction, the creature punishes the creator. In the military sphere, the development of autonomous weapons and drones recalls stories of beings that torment without killing. The ability to inflict pain without death resembles the 5-month torment inflicted by Revelation's apocalyptic locusts. Azazel becomes a mirror reflecting our concerns about technology we do not control. The militarization of robotics and cybernetics raises questions about delegated responsibility. Who chooses targets for an autonomous weapon? Who is blamed if an algorithm errs? Azazel could be interpreted as personification of guilt spread through complex systems. Another area of debate is the use of substances to enhance appearance and performance. Today, cosmetics and plastic surgery allow transformations that once seemed magical. Social pressure to meet beauty standards can lead to physical and psychological dangers. Azazel taught women to make up. We live in a culture that monetizes beauty. A modern reflection might ask, what price do we pay for dominion over our bodies? Some find empowerment in modifying appearance. Others feel they are surrendering to an unattainable ideal. This debate intensifies with the arrival of biotech promising to alter traits before birth. Editing genes to select height, endurance, or eye color recalls stories of beings that manipulate creation. Environmental crisis also relates to Azazel. Massive use of metallurgy, fossil fuels, and plastic has transformed the planet. The technology that brought us comfort also threatens our home. Environmentalists warn that we must redirect knowledge towards sustainable living. In a world where deserts advance and arid lands grow, the image of Azazel in the wilderness can be seen as a reminder of the barrenness we leave behind. If we do not moderate resource exploitation, we will exile our future to a desert with no return. Space exploration opens a different horizon. The dream of colonizing other planets resembles the Watcher's desire to descend to Earth. Scientists imagine colonies on Mars or Jupiter's moons to ensure long-term survival. Yet ethical questions arise. Do we have the right to transform other worlds? How do we avoid repeating in space the problems we have created on Earth? Some thinkers recall Azazel's story to argue we should not rush. Technology gives us wings, but we must plan our steps to avoid becoming trapped in our own labyrinth. All these speculations are extrapolations of an eternal theme, the ambivalence of knowledge. We live in an era where technological advancement intertwines with ethics, and where the line between benefit and destruction is blurred. Azazel's story can serve as warning and inspiration to handle innovation with prudence. Each era reinterprets its demons and heroes according to its concerns. Azazel reminds us that knowledge is never neutral. Its meaning depends on how we use it. Azazel as psychological symbol. Beyond theological and historical interpretations, Azazel embodies a deep symbol. In analytical psychology, Carl Jung spoke of the shadow as the part of our personality containing repressed, denied, or unacceptable aspects. The shadow is not evil in itself. It is a set of unintegrated potentials. If one identifies only with the conscious ego and denies the shadow, it is projected onto others and manifests destructively. As bearer of hidden knowledge and teacher of outward appearance, Azazel can represent that collective shadow carrying our guilt and repressed desires. The scapegoat ritual shows how communities project faults onto an external object that is then expelled. This practice is universal. Many cultures perform ceremonies transferring evils to an animal or object to ward off misfortune. Ancient Rome's February used strips of goat skin to lightly strike those seeking fertility and purification, recalling that contact with a sacrificial animal could transfer impurity. In West Africa, some peoples use Enkaisi dolls to contain and remove diseases. In the Catholic tradition, confession functions similarly. Sin is verbalized and given to the institution for absolution. All these practices recognize the shadow and attempt to manage it. However, when guilt is transferred unconsciously, there is a risk of victimizing individuals or groups who become scapegoats. The medieval witch hunts, pogroms against minorities, or social media disinformation campaigns are examples of society projecting fears onto others. In modern storytelling, villain characters embody the collective shadow. Figures such as Darth Vader or Thanos represent fears and desires for unrestrained power. Defeating them in fiction provides catharsis. Azazel serves a similar function in apocalyptic texts. Binding him allows the community to feel it controls its corruption. But the shadow does not disappear. It reshapes. Jung proposed integrating the shadow and turning it into a source of creativity. In practice, this means acknowledging impulses, accepting ambivalence, and sublimating destructive energies. From another angle, scapegoating can serve social cohesion. By sharing guilt and expelling it, the community strengthens itself. The danger lies in using this mechanism to justify violence. Azazel's story reminds us that ritual violence, though symbolically effective, does not eliminate the roots of suffering. Only by addressing the sources of violence, inequality, and pain can we transcend the need for scapegoats. This understanding is relevant to restorative justice movements, seeking to heal wounds through dialogue and shared responsibility. Symbolically, sending the goat into the wilderness equals throwing into the unconscious all that we do not want to face. The risk is that what is not integrated returns with force, like an Azazel bound who reappears to challenge our morality. In Enoch's story, Azazel's punishment can be seen as repression of creativity and curiosity. The Watchers taught arts that allowed humans to improve life, but they also introduced the possibility of war and vanity. By chaining Azazel, perhaps creative energy was repressed and the desire to experiment condemned. The challenge is to find balance, recognize the shadow, integrate dark knowledge, and use it responsibly. This reflection leads us to question how society treats bearers of disruptive ideas. Often those who bring new visions are demonized and excluded, though their contributions later prove vital. Learning from the stories of Azazel and other scapegoats could help us embrace diversity and discern between knowledge that liberates and knowledge that enslaves. In the end, the shadow is not an enemy, but an essential part of who we are. Integrating it allows us to grow. Additional dimensions: desert, femininity, and emotion. There are other dimensions of Azazel that deserve broader consideration. One is his relationship with the desert as a metaphor of solitude and testing. In many traditions, the desert symbolizes a place where souls are purified and divine voices are heard. Moses wandered for 40 years, Jesus fasted for 40 days, Muhammad received revelations in the cave of Hira. In that same desert, the goat for Azazel is cast. One can interpret that evil is exiled to the setting where the mind faces itself. Azazel's penance, bound in loneliness, reflects our own inner penances when we recognize our errors and confront our shadows. This metaphor expands when we consider that in psychology the desert symbolizes the unconscious, that inner space where ideas germinate in apparent barrenness. Another dimension is the relationship between Azazel and femininity in Enoch's narrative. The angel taught women to use cosmetics and ornaments. This detail has served to justify misogynistic interpretations, yet it can also be seen as evidence of ancient unease about the power of beauty and its control over the male gaze. Beauty becomes both a tool of power and a means of control, just as metallurgy provides physical weapons. Azazel's teaching includes seduction, suggesting that knowledge can be both beautiful and dangerous. Some modern readings see Azazel as a symbol of liberation from aesthetic oppression. Learning to adorn oneself could mean regaining sovereignty over one's body in societies valuing austerity. However, one could also see that Azazel's teaching introduces vanity and competition for appearance, leading to conflicts and imbalances. It is also important to consider the connection between Azazel and human emotions. The scapegoat ritual implies depositing guilt and shame onto another. Collective guilt can be destructive if not processed consciously. In psychotherapy, people learn to recognize guilt and responsibility without delegating them to external factors. Azazel might personify what bears the weight of our negative emotions. Binding him may symbolize chaining guilt instead of integrating it. This perspective opens a debate about the need for purification rituals and their role in communal mental health. Reflecting on Azazel as symbol reminds us of his ability to provoke intellectual debates. His presence in sacred texts and oral traditions shows that ancient narratives remain relevant. Azazel connects themes of morality, aesthetics, technology, and power. By meditating on his figure, we re-examine our beliefs about disobedience, creativity, and punishment. We ask whether the limits imposed on us are fair, or whether, like Azazel, we need to challenge prohibitions to evolve. The social dimension of Azazel extends to the dynamic between center and periphery. In the biblical narrative, Israel's camp is associated with divine order. All that is pure happens within, around the tabernacle. The impure must go outside. The desert is the periphery. In modern life, there are also symbolic centers and peripheries. Those with access to education and technology versus those marginalized. Azazel becomes representative of the marginal. How do we treat people who live on the margins? Do we assign them blame for problems they did not cause? Analyzing Azazel's figure leads us to consider structures of exclusion and to question whether our own systems unjustly expel individuals or groups. The concept of the price of knowledge is another relevant thread. In many stories, acquiring new knowledge requires sacrifice. Adam and Eve eat from the tree of knowledge and are expelled from paradise. Odysseus consults the dead Tiresias and must sacrifice an animal. Initiation stories often depict the hero undergoing painful trials before gaining wisdom. Azazel pays with his freedom for teaching. This pattern suggests that wisdom is not free. The questions that arise are we willing to pay the price of knowing? How far will we go in our quest for answers? Most importantly, whom do we sacrifice on the way? Conclusion. Questions for the reader. After this extensive journey through ancient texts, mythologies, modern theories, and psychological reflections, we arrive at a moment to look inward and outward at once. Azazel's story offers a mirror in which our aspirations and fears reflect. Who is Azazel to you? Is he a demon embodying corruption and disorder? A fallen angel who brought a spark of knowledge? A banished god unsettling the powerful? Or a symbol of our excesses? Comparisons with Prometheus, Loki, Set, and many others show that each culture processes the tension between order and transgression differently. Listening to modern theories reminds us that the search for truth and technology cannot be separated from ethics and responsibility. What do you think of the hypotheses describing Azazel as a visitor from another world or as the memory of a lost civilization? Do you see them as useful metaphors, fanciful speculation, or inspiration to broaden your mind? Psychological reflections invite us to embrace our shadows, to stop projecting our guilt onto scapegoats, and instead recognize and transform them. The scapegoat ritual and Azazel's figure speak of our tendency to blame others for our failures. How can we break this cycle? Are we willing to assume responsibility for using knowledge and building society? Finally, the viewer's question remains open. Do you believe Azazel is merely a symbol of our excesses or the distorted memory of a real being who changed human history? What does it mean to consider that a knowledge bearer was imprisoned to protect us? And what does this say about the relationship between power and knowledge? In posing these questions, we do not seek a definitive answer, but rather to generate rich, ongoing dialogue. This script, like a tapestry, has woven threads from different traditions. May its texture inspire you to continue investigating and participating in the conversation. The mystery of Azazel does not end with these words. Like the desert to which the goat is sent, it is a vast, open, and enigmatic space awaiting our exploration with respect and curiosity.